Chinese checkers. Is there really a plan that the Chinese have, or they're just winging it? Find out here. Welcome back to my channel. This is Aadi Achint. This video is all about finding out what is the Chinese checkers that the Chinese are playing with India today. Is there really some depth to their thought, or they're just reacting to situations as they are coming up? Some interesting factoids has come across in the past week, 10 days, and I thought I'll just compile all of them and find out what sense do all these facts make, and whether the Chinese have actually had a pre-thought out plan when they started this attempted incursion into Indian territory. Is there something that they've got in mind, or is this just a diversionary tactics for the Communist Party of China or the CCP to keep themselves and their public engaged? There are certain facts that came out last week. Firstly, the Chinese released a news that all Chinese soldiers were being given pure oxygen for about an hour at altitudes above 4,000 meters, which is approximately about 13,300 feet. Seems to be a little surprising considering the fact that there is no such news of any such oxygen being given to any of Indian soldiers deployed in those regions. It is also very funny when you do a little research about Ladakh to find out that the State Bank of India has a branch at Tangze in Ladakh at an altitude of 14,500 feet. And they work pretty much normally. Operations have been going on very smoothly. It is very interesting to see that the PLA soldier requires this kind of comfort to survive in those environments. There was another news snippet that came out which said that the Chinese soldiers were being rotated daily or every 2 days from their forward positions at very high altitudes by teams that were stationed at a little lower altitude. What that means to say is that the guys that are situated up in high altitudes are being brought down every day or every second day and are being replaced by troops that are stationed down. Chinese are actually having to make so much effort to maintain their troops at that very high altitude. Are the Indians doing it? I guess not, because one thing that I'd like to tell you about the Indian Armed Forces is that the Indian soldier who is deployed in high altitude areas go through a acclimatization process before they are deployed in those regions. This is something that the PLA skipped. Indian Army also has a high altitude warfare school which is known as HAWS, which literally takes the soldier through step by step in making sure that he is ready to fight in high altitude areas as it is desired out of him. They are highly trained, highly motivated, and of course able to survive in those conditions. It is interesting that the PLA has to go through this entire rigmarole just to keep the pressure on India as it desires to do for reasons beyond me or any sensible person's understanding. This in contrast with the Indian soldier who's dug in there for the long haul. As a matter of fact, the PLA was not expecting India to continue occupying the heights in the peak of winters. This is being seen when PLA and the Chinese officials have been caught unaware of the logistical requirements of an army to survive in those conditions. As a matter of fact, they've been scrambling around all over the world to try and find logistics, especially clothing and other equipment required to perform their duties in those regions. This, in my opinion, is the fact that the Chinese are trying to make up for their military commanders' lack of experience in modern and high altitude warfare. The People's Liberation Army, which is ruled by the Communist Party of China, needs the PLA to be a modernized force by the year 2027. And a world-class military by the year 2050. This is coming out because the recent meeting of the all-powerful Central Military Commission of China. They released new guidelines in the month of November telling their commanders that they are meant to foster integration between various combat forces of the PLA and the advanced weapons that the PLA is producing for themselves. An insider of the military has claimed to state that 70% of these guidelines have been copied from the United States, which China does best, of course. The Chinese claim that the coronavirus has not hit them at all or their army. One thing is for sure, that a military insider close to Beijing says that the coronavirus prevented the PLA to meet its own training targets. When you actually take a look at the uniformed members of the Central Military Commission, just one of them has any combat experience. But his experience has been decades ago and on, if I may put it in very simple words, the side that got thrashed General Li Zuocheng, the chief of the PLA Joint Staff Department, he cut his teeth during the war with Vietnam in the 1970s when the Vietnamese thrashed the PLA, being such a small country on its border. Now, looking at the fact that the PLA was not even ready or expecting the Indian Armed Forces to react in such a way, I thought the game of military commanders was to preempt the position that would be taken by the opposing army and prepare themselves for it. Isn't that the old adage which says, hope for the best and prepare for the worst? Considering this, the United States just released a report which comes out of the United States China Economic and Security Review Commission that there is some evidence that suggested that the Chinese government had planned the aggression at Galwan Valley, and of course potentially also including the possible fatalities as well as casualties that would happen because of that. It seizes me to wonder what the actual Chinese game plan is. They're fingering up Pakistan on one side, for which I've also made a video which states that the Pakistanis are literally a pawn in the Chinese hand today, and they are like those hand puppets we used to see in those old fairs when the Chinaman is standing on top and making sure Imran Khan is jumping to his every tune. In other snippets where the Chinese tried to play mind games with India, it also released certain news that there was continuous construction being carried out by the PLA next to the Indo-Tibet border close to the area of Doklam. As a matter of fact, Bhutan's India envoy Major General Westop Nangel came out and said very clearly there is no Chinese village inside Bhutan. And all the news are fabricated. There are so many people who are trying to do these satellite images and this and that, and they all become experts in military strategies. To all of them I'll say, if you have not visited the scene of the crime, it is all speculation. Apart from that, some other interesting things actually that came out. The Chinese defense minister, who was supposed to be on a tour of Nepal, of Bangladesh, was actually snubbed by both of the governments. The Chinese defense minister wanted a bilateral meeting with the Nepalese defense minister, who incidentally is also the Prime Minister of Nepal, Prime Minister KP Sharma Oli. This was declined under the protocol. He also tried his luck with the Bangladeshis, who declined to have a meeting with him and literally said that the meeting shall be rescheduled at both of their conveniences. This is all happening after the Indian diplomats have visited all these countries and pretty much done a huge amount of patchwork in the somewhat severed relationships between India and these countries. Well, what could the Chinese defense minister do? He met what is the most useless country in the entire world, the Pakistanis. They signed a paper, details of which are not coming forth anytime soon. It may as be a blank piece of paper and a complete eyewash. Both the countries are known for it. My opinion, China must understand it is dealing not with Pakistan, but with India, who will not only stand up to it, but also act to ensure that the China show is slowed down and steadily cut off. By the facts that I've told you, it clearly shows that the Chinaman had no plans before they came in. They just thought that the Indians would roll over and push back as they've always done. This is not the time for the Chinaman to start fingering with India. Remember, it was India that started the ban on the Chinese apps. It was India that stood up to the Chinese aggression and turned the world to see the reality. It is still India that is developing its sharp teeth to bite the China madman if he tries any stunts. Mr. Xi Jinping, the game is getting over. It is going to be difficult to find a face saver. Normally I don't comment on politics because this is more or less a strategic defense channel, but with the current ongoing farmers' protest happening in and around Delhi, all I'd like to urge them is not to let the anti-India forces gain control or take up the show of them. Their demands may be valid or invalid is a totally different discussion, and I don't want to comment on it. But all I want to say is that the anti-India elements that we all know exist and are trying to take over or hijack the entire protest should be kept away. These are the people that are not favorable for anyone. One must remember these people have their strings being pulled from across the border on the east or the west. Thank you for watching my video. Subscribe to my channel, share my videos with your friends, and yes, of course, As I say in all my videos, share a thought for our soldiers standing in the battle lines against both our very friendly neighbors. Once a day, every day. Jai Hind.